Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks again, Chime, for having us, and welcome to kicking off the NBA All-Star Game. All-Star Week, I should say. I'm Stephanie Latham. I lead Global Brand Partnerships and Advertising at Roblox.
So I do get a front row seat most days to sports and culture happening in the virtual world, but I am thrilled to be joined today with two people, and Vineet, I feel like you shared a little bit of this in your intro, but who are leading at the forefront of culture and helping brands and in both of your cases industries really reimagine what that looks like. So guys, maybe just to get started, to make sure everyone understands kind of who you are and where you're from, quick intro.
So I just said hello, so I'll pass it to Moksha soon. Vineet, Chime's a financial technology company built on the premise that banking should be free, accessible, and fair to everyday people. And that's really resonating. Like I said, we've built that deeply through culture. Bit of my background, I started my career almost 25, 30 years ago, where you started back in the day in CPG. And that's where you went to learn brand building, where you learn business, where you learn the commercial acumen. And about a decade ago, I came out to Silicon Valley and kind of got hooked, and now I live here and hope to stay here. Came out here to join Ancestry, and we created the genetic movement in America, like really getting, and many of you might have spit in a tube to find out where you were from. Talking about friction in a marketing product, right? Trying to get someone to spit in a tube and put it in a FedEx box and send it somewhere. That is a tough movement to create. So that happened all through culture as well. You know, you only create movements like that if you can really put yourself in the cultural zeitgeist. And now we're doing that here with Chime. So it's been a pleasure to be here in the Valley. Great to create movements, disruptive companies. I think that's really the power of what marketers do. And yes, pleasure to be here. Over to Moksha.
Hey everyone, I'm Moksha, and I helped start a company called Complex about, 2002. Really sort of with the idea of creating a brand that was like super immersed in convergence culture, and it's been a kind of a long journey. When we first launched the brand, we launched it on Sony mini discs. If anyone remembers those, talk about friction. So that scaled quickly to zero.
7 people that
We gave it away to free. But, our big idea was that we're going to be the first digital-only magazine. And then the business went through a ton of transition from being sort of like traditional print to traditional digital, and now we're really sort of a 360 or three-legged stool business where we have got sort of a premium content business squarely aimed at Gen Z and young millennials, and then we have a big emerging e-commerce business where we're selling the most interesting collaborations and hard to get product to that same consumer. And then we've got a really robust experiential business which is sort of expanding globally, and it is sort of this intersection of all things culture and shopping, and Complex really aims to be sort of that spotlight on culture, and specifically sort of what we would define as like convergence culture, which is bringing together music, art, sports, fashion, all at this intersection, because consumers, the way they are now, there's so much access. They really think of themselves as a multi-hyphenate, and they kind of want to be at the center of that convergence. So anyway, that's why.
Check out Complex if you're not familiar. Very cool experience, many experiences. I guess in both of your stories, the disruption, I think, is really like a through line in terms of what you're doing and what you're leading. Both Vineet, how you're disrupting our general concept of baking and what that can look like, and of course, Moksha over here on shopping and commerce and all of that. So can you just share a little bit about how you keep disruption at the forefront of how you're thinking about your strategies for the future?
Yeah, and I'm going to give kind of the old school answer on disruption specifically, which is sort of threefold. It starts with, being extremely member or audience centric, right? And being absolutely obsessed with what problem you're solving for them, right? And usually companies do that part all right at the beginning, but then you go to the next stage where you then need a product and a business model that is aligned to their interests. Where a lot of companies fall off is they're really clear on who their audience is and the problems they're solving. They build a pretty good product, and then their business model or how they monetize or how they make money can sometimes be orthogonal to what everyday people need. And that is in so many categories. And that's why you're seeing businesses like ours, software-enabled businesses, right? We don't have huge capital infrastructures and we're asset light, right? So we're able to then invest that margin back into building a revenue model or a business model that isn't punitive, right, to everyday people. And that's the second piece of it. And then the third piece of it is, and I mean this, absolute transparency in everything. The days of marketers being able to put lipstick on a pig are over. People will read, they will see, they will talk about it. It's full access, as Moksha was saying. So you gotta converge those three things. You gotta know who you're targeting with razor sharpness, build a product and a revenue or business model that is aligned to those needs. And then lastly, just be ruthlessly authentic against all of that, because you slip up once, it's gonna be all over the place.
I love that. I think embedded in that too is also permission to flex as the consumer flexes or their needs flex, and like being agile on that, which you have both exhibited. I'll let you share a little more.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that sentiment. I think, at least for our business, it's I like that word, ruthlessness of focusing on youth culture. Like, I think capitalism largely is disruptive as an art form. You know, somebody's always coming to invent something new, and I think as a brand, you have to be obsessed with the next generation, youth culture. You can never bet against that. You can never say, hey, I got the 35-year-old. You're going to be dead in 50 years if you don't capture that 16-year-old. And then you have to really be comfortable with being uncomfortable and adopting new technologies. You know, there's so much going on with like new modalities of creative or new ways of doing things. And if you bet against youth culture and you bet against technology, you're going to get disrupted as a business. So I think those are things we're constantly focused on. And then, you know, for the consumer, creating things that are really interesting to them. I'll give you an example that's coming up. The Dodgers and the Cubs are playing an expo game in Tokyo next month. And obviously Ohtani is like, you know, the hottest shit ever, right? Like everyone's obsessed about him. And we were thinking about like, how can we make a moment of this? And we leveraged a relationship with like the preeminent Japanese artist, this guy Takashi Murakami, who's, you know, paintings sell for, you know, $2-3 million. And we went to him and we said, you know, this is a really unique situation where you're like one of the premier artists in the world. You have massive consumer demand. Ohtani is the premier baseball player. You're both Japanese. Let's do something really interesting. So we got Murakami to design the uniforms that they will play in during the expos, and we're going to be exclusively selling that product through Complex. And that will be, you know, just like an example of intersecting art and sport and then being disruptive in a positive way for consumer and delivering them something that they really can't get elsewhere, right? Like, so few people will have the financial means to fly over there, have that experience from a US consumer perspective, and to give that consumer a memento, a token of that time, is a really special experience for them, and it becomes almost like social currency within their peer group.
I love that example. Wouldn't be sad if we had those on Roblox in our marketplace. Little virtual jersey situation, but we'll follow after.
You'll make it on stage.
Okay, back to this though. I think this is a really great example. Thank you for sharing this. I think one of the things that both of your companies and brands do really well is not just participate in culture, but lead it. And what are some of your advice to the audience, best practices on that, of how do you stay ahead so that you can be leading and not just passively involved?
Well, I think the first thing is mindset, right? Brand building now, all brands, the job of a CMO and their team is you're an editor of almost like a magazine, or back in the day, or like a streaming network, right? Like, the role of brands now is we are entertainment. We have to get attention through entertainment. That's why companies like Complex and all these sort of entertainment to brand merging sort of companies are doing so well. So we look at ourselves as like, first and foremost, competing in the attention economy. With all due respect to all the, I see some bank folks in the room, you know, we don't really track ourselves against the banking brands, so I don't think those are the brands that capture attention. We do brand love tracking, and we do obsessive tracking against Yeti and Crocs and, you know, Liquid Death. Like, I know exactly how our consumers think of us versus those brands, you know? But those brands are also entertainment brands. They build content that resonates in culture, and that's where it starts. And if you have that mindset, think of yourself as like a Netflix streaming executive deciding the programming, right? If that's the mindset you have, then you have no choice but to go deep into the crevices of culture and understand what the next hot thing is, you know? The example for us would be, you know, we were kind of hitting up the WNBA just as we saw it starting to spark, right? Just a little bit. And similar to the example that he shared, we created a whole series called Ballin' on a Budget. You know, I think Karen, who's speaking later, was a big part of that. She's over there. And essentially, we saw this fusion of sort of tunnel fit culture that was happening in one place, that's fashion. We saw the fusion of like kind of the emergence to our social listening and being in touch of like almost thrift culture is coming out in a really big way. And then we saw the WNBA getting really big, and you're like, kind of like what you said, how do you fuse things together? And that's really that multi-hyphenate consumer today. And things like that explode. When they explode, you don't just stop with that. You then turn that into some sort of we almost think of like programming. Like, do we launch a weekly episode? Do we run our own streaming network here, you know? And that's really the way we think about it. And I think that's the mindset you have to have. It starts there. If you have that mindset and you hire editors and programmers, essentially, content programmers, then a brand can participate. But it starts with that mindset and having the right people.
Will you just give like 2 more sentences on that program, because it was so cool and I'm not sure that everyone's familiar?
Ballin' on a Budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure Karen will bring it up a little bit later.
Sorry, Karen. Don't want to steal your thunder, but it's amazing.
But essentially, I think the insight the team came up with was essentially, you know, people want tunnel fit. But because of our mission, again, we're guided by our mission of helping unlock progress for everyday people. Progress can just be those small things like getting that fit that you want, but doing it responsibly. So Ballin' on a Budget, we would take WNBA stars and NBA stars, and we go shopping with them using their own fit, their own style. And we would actually go to like a thrift store or something, and they would help pick out the things they would wear in the tunnel, right, on their way in. And essentially, we're trying to help America, all of whom want this look, but they're not going to spend on the Gucci's and the Pradas, and we don't think that's responsible. So we try to help them get that look in a way that's resonant for them. That helps us talk about what is typically kind of a boring category of like finances and all that stuff, but in a way that like hits the algorithm, right, in social, that people actually want to pay attention to. And I think the thing you have to most realize is programming is also no longer one way, right? The algos show us all what we click on. And so you have to be able to participate in the TikTok algo, the Instagram algo, right? The Snap algo. And so being able to hack those algorithms and being able to really understand what content will get fed is really important. And a lot of times it's this multi-hyphenate, like mushing things together, because that's where interests are. And then you start to show up in the feeds, and you drive relevance with kind of a traditionally boring category, but right in the depths of culture.
Yeah, just kind of build off that. I think brands, you know, sort of whether you're in my space or in Vineet's space, like it's really important to think of the social channels as like your new cable channels. Like that's your distribution to the consumer, and it's imperative that you figure out how to make your content interesting and travel beyond just the feed or the people that follow you because of the algorithms. Like you have to intentionally design the content to have moments that have the potentiality to go viral. And like an example is like everything we do content-wise doesn't all work, but we make moments in the content where those clips on TikTok or on Reels or whatever it is are going to get 50, 20 million views. There's like a lot of intention that goes into that. And like, I don't know if anyone saw it, but we recently did something with, sort of in the sports arena with Angel Reese, with our show 360 with Speedy. It went off virally, and then it has legs beyond that. Then she's bringing him onto her podcast. Now they have like a live TikTok show where they're giving dating advice to people. And it's like that one moment, that one little thing where she asked him about his dating and he wouldn't answer it. It did 50 million views on TikTok. Well, that created 3 more shows. And it also put Complex in 17 other feeds that wouldn't have arrived at originally. And you have to like really push yourself to create content that has those potential clips that will take off. Or, as I see so many brands, I think, in my opinion, make this mistake. They've got, it's like a US handle, they've got a Europe handle, they've got a LATAM handle, and everyone's talking about different stuff, and they're not entertaining and engaging and educating the consumer with the same voice. And it's like, I'll pick on them, but I just saw, it's like, Crown Royal has no different experience in North America, Canada, England, or Mexico City. It's whiskey. Like, it should have the same vibe, the same tonality. It should be premium in every market. But because they don't really get it, it's all disparate, it's all messy, and they're not creating the same content, they're not telling the same stories. So I think,
They need to call you?
no, they need to call someone. I just think it's like probably a matrixed organization, but they're not thinking about their channels as like the new TV, the new way to connect with the consumer, and they're not thinking like, I need to entertain, I need to engage, I need to educate this consumer. They're just putting shit out there, and it doesn't work.
I mean, the only other thing I'd add is building on this example, if you're like an executive of an old school TV station now, how do they work, right? You would launch a pilot. If that went well, you would then like maybe sign on for 3 more shows, and then if that went well, you sign on for some seasons. The other mistake people made is like, they launch and leave, and we talk a lot about launch and leverage, launch and push. This is an example, one post, we know like, we had this one post where we like made this board game because people would rather talk about their sex lives with their family than their financial lives. And one of the biggest problems, you have this craze going on now of loud budgeting and talking openly about finances. Like, for some reason, it's been a really taboo topic. We created this like taboo like game called Dollars and Cents, and we had one social post. It exploded. We got in the board game business. This is now was in Walgreens shelves all over the country. As a physical good, a product. It went from social post to hitting the shelves across the country in 3 months. CPG companies can't move that fast. I don't know how to run a board game company, but if you're able to create a movement, then turn it to IRL, like. I talk to my team about, think of like how Disney builds franchises, right? Like the Avengers start as content and they turn into toys and amusement parks, and you gotta think about things in that way, right? Like the entertainment also today doesn't stop in the stream. You gotta push it all the way through, and I know Complex knows that really well. If you guys have been to Complex Con and experienced that, but all of this is a brand now, right? It's the connectivity across IRL, streams, your product, your stories, your content, all of that matters.
I think that's a really good point also about experimentation and piloting. Food experience is a big part of what we do as well, and like, we ultimately created that show Hot Ones, which is the #1 most watched show on YouTube, and you can buy it at
Oh, we should have done this panel.
and all of that. Yeah. But going back to Vineet's point, like we probably tried 20 food shows, and like one was like a burger show, sort of like Hot Ones but about burgers, like all these different variations. There was like a sweet show eating sweet foods. Anyway, all these things that we experimented with, they all failed, but we got that one that took off, right? And I think that that's something that I think marketers should be comfortable with. I know it's probably difficult to do, but like that level of experimentation and commitment to piloting yields results. And then I just wanted to underscore that point because I can't agree more. Like so many brands are like one and done. They do a rotation, a new brand manager comes in, that person has to get hot within an organization, so they throw out everything that was good before, and they kind of alienate the consumer in doing that. And I think there's a lot of value in being consistent and driving home and continuing to work on those things that win.
So doubling down on, we're here at All-Star Week, but I think one of the hottest topics in sports right now is women's sports. You both shared a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about why you've seen this tremendous shift and some of the things you're betting on to be culturally relevant in that space.
I think WNB, it's a number of factors, but it's like women's tennis, right? Like, these women are bigger stars than the men. And some of that has to be with like the way the game is played, the decline in ratings. Basketball culture is bigger than it's ever been. It's more influential than it's ever been. But if you looked at the ratings and the gameplay, it would suggest otherwise. And I think, Angel, Caitlin, Cameron, these guys are freaking mega stars, and they're just getting started. And if you look at all of them, like, they're all triple threats. They are influential in style. Angel's got her podcast. Cameron's like getting her doctorate, huge in fashion, and can play. And like, they are the prototype of what all young men and women want to be like. Like, you might be an accountant, but you want to be a fashion designer and a DJ at the same time. I mean, it's really true. I think wherever I put my iPhone, the access of the iPhone over the last, since 2011, how many years that is, it's given everyone so much access that there is so little satisfaction with what you do. So you're pushing yourself. I must be interesting. How do you become interesting? It's through all of these activities or the physical items that you buy. And I think they are perfect role modeling and articulation. And, it was kind of this inflection point with the men's sports, but I don't know, it's great. It takes off.
Yeah, I just say plus one all of that, but also there's this real rise of like hustle culture and people backing the underdog, right? And women's sports as being so, I don't know a better word, let's say suppressed for so long that I just think people root, people are rooting for these mega talented, multi-hyphenate stars, is the only way to put it. And I think you're seeing that in many different walks and subcultures. People are now able to create content and become stars overnight in creator culture and in influence culture. And I think that's here to stay. And I think what you're seeing in women's sports is a piece of that entire macro sort of cultural truth that we're all living in. If brands aren't attaching themselves to hustle culture, side hustles, all that stuff, no one wants to be defined by one thing anymore. And I think some of these athletes are, frankly, the best in the world at showcasing that as possible.
Totally agreed, and really exciting. And excited for more conversations today around that. Going back to something I think you both have touched on, right? And you used the example of thinking about you're in charge of streaming content and Netflix and what's your slate. And Moksha, you talked about thinking about all of these platforms as the new TV and your strategy across them. You both have great examples of this too, but I think one of the things that makes that really successful is not just one way, old school network TV, but two-way communication. And how have you used some of your activations to really create that conversation with your consumers?
Yeah, look, you have to build community. It is not just about you respond to people's likes or whatever comments on a post, right? You have to build virality and community directly into your product experience. There's no shortcut. So we have things we have a tool we do fee-free overdrafts, right? Literally you can get up to $200, no fees. But we have something called Spot Me, right? Kind of everyday language. Spot Me is something where we actually give our members X amount of dollars every month, and they can actually spot other people extra overdraft if they need it in our community. So it's social overdraft protection. And we've actually now, where people go is they go to Twitter, they go to like Instagram, and they try to like, they go like, hey, who's got $20, I'll give you back next month, and it becomes this whole like viral thing. So I guess there is no I want to go back with like, there is no shortcut to like, your product has to be social at the core, and you can't fake it, you know? So there's that side of it. And then the second thing is, you know, we just opened this thing called the Chime Lane at the Dallas Mavericks Arena, American Airlines Center. We want everyday people to feel like VIPs. You show up with your Chime card at American Airlines Center, there's this green carpet, it's like this crazy experience, you have free popcorn, you have free drinks, and we're like that's how we build community through IRL, VIP, they just feel like they belong to something bigger. So there's this notion of community-based experiences, but you also have to build community and virality into the core of your product experience. And you do this thing, Chip, the shot at it.
Yeah, totally.
I think for us, it's you know, like with our product, it's a little bit different because consumers are coming to us for point of view. They want us to articulate to them why they should know about something, why they should buy something, why they should be, you know, entertained by this. So it's not like a Twitch live stream where you're sort of like answering all the questions and all that kind of stuff. They're really seeking validation from us around those sort of entertainment or physical purchases. With that said, we do focus a lot on giving sort of the next talent, the next brands. We want to shine a light on them and be a springboard to their next success. And this really dates way back with Complex. You know, we were Kim Kardashian's first ever cover. You know, Kanye West, Kid Cudi, all these people, we gave them their breaks. Kanye West was an editor at large at Complex for many years. We did a column called Kanye's Beatdowns where he critiqued people like Brad Pitt's style on red carpets. But, you know, he was just like a producer at the time. And we sort of identified that talent and tried to give them a forum and a spotlight to propel their career. Or, you know, ComplexCon where we have, you know, 300 or so of the world's greatest brands selling their most highly coveted product. We create a special place called Brands to Watch where we give 6 or 12 brands that literally can't afford to be there the space and activation for free so they can get a shot at being, you know, rubbing shoulders with Nike, Adidas, Givenchy, whoever is there. So I think it's things like that, making sure that we're not involved as much in that two-way conversation, but we're very much invested on giving who's next that opportunity. And I think it's kind of a similar ethos to what you're doing.
All right, you two, you have such a wealth of knowledge. We could carry this on, I'm sure, for several more hours of your examples. We're gonna get the hook off here in a second. So one last question for both of you. We're future focused, right? For all the marketers and partners in the audience, what is one major culture shift that you're sort of anticipating on the horizon that you would advise all brands and partners to be keeping an eye on?
I mean, actually, this is kind of the business you're in. The next big shift is going to be social commerce. Everything will be shoppable, content will be shoppable, you will be watching a screen and be like, hey, I like what she's wearing, I want to buy it right now. Everything will be shoppable, the funnel will get completely compressed, and so you got to figure out a way to participate kind of IRL, and I don't mean just IRL like physically, like whatever you're in, the experience you're in right now, whether that's on a screen, in person, whatever it is, I think social commerce is going to explode, and it's around the corner. I mean, I'm not going to give you the traditional AI answer stuff because we talk about that enough, but it's that social commerce that's going to be, I think, transformative for brands. If you don't figure out a way to monetize in an authentic, not overly selly way in that, I think brands are going to be in trouble.
I would add social and immersive, but I think that's the spirit of what you're saying, and I think what we see all the time is this Gen Z doesn't differentiate between virtual, physical, like it's all seamless to them, and in many cases they care more about dressing their virtual selves than their, so something for us all to keep an eye on. All right, go ahead, Moksha, bring us home.
I 100% agree with all of that. Great for validating our business model. But I think like the big thing that we're focused on, and you know, I don't know if it's worried, but we're really focused on it, is like what are the new modalities of creative and content creation and how you deliver that. Like Google search fell off a cliff. cable television is going to hit a wall and die, right? And if there's anybody in that business, I'm sorry, but it's going to happen. And you have to think about how can you create content, how can you create experiences to show up in perplexity or to show up on some AI chatbot platform. And that's not clear yet, but you're going to have to think about how do you get your voice, your brand, your creative into those spaces in a way that cannot be disrupted or stolen by OpenAI or whoever, sort of the creator there is. And that's, I think that's really the challenge for everyone, because everyone's over talking AI, but we're really just at the beginning of it. I don't know if you guys all saw the Skims ad that came out this week. It was all created in AI. It's pretty sick. It's pretty amazing that you can do that. You don't even need the star there to create it. It's I don't know, we're just at the tip of the spear there, and so that's the big kind of shift there. It's how do you create content that shows up in these places?
And I'll add, I know we gotta go, I'll add one thing to that. We don't have retained agencies anymore, right? We do project-based work.
Yeah.
The other day, my in-house creative team, we do almost all of our work in-house, literally showed me a storyboard for a new kind of piece of content we're putting out, and it was like a movie. It was literally like I was approving, remember in the old, it was pencil drawings. I was approving literally almost a full-scale production, and so it's unbelievable the modalities and then where you need to distribute and where you need to show up, and that's going to be in the end, if content is king, the brands that figure out the fastest path to get those shots and goals and experiments out, because I can promise you're going to be perfectly wrong in all your guesses.
Yeah.
So the quicker you can get shots and goal and experiment and pilot, the better, and AI is going to be the thing that I think is that.
All right, well guys, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. Round of applause for